Okay. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Building Regulations Examiners and Appeals for September 18th, 2014. Would you take roll, please?
Certainly. Mr. Steele?
Here.
Mr. Fradine?
Here.
Mr. Cowling?
Here.
Mr. Hickle?
Here.
Mrs. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Robinson? Mrs. Ballard? Mr. Field?
Here.
Mrs. Logan? Mr.
Here.
Here. I would ask that each of you silence your cell phones so they don't go off in the middle of our work here tonight. Yeah, we get a hum once in a while. Somebody's like, what? It comes and goes, we learn, so until we can learn the words, we can stuck with the phones. We do have the agenda before us. I'll entertain a movement to approve the agenda. Moved by Mr. Steele. Second by Mr. Fradine. With everybody's permission, I would like to add in an item between 2 and 3, just introductions. We have a new member of the board here. Any other comments regarding the agenda? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. We've got an agenda. We have a new face to our board, Mr. McKee. And I'd like to do introductions from everybody to him and him to us. Since he's the new person on the pass on this class. Maybe if we just start at the far end, Mr. Fields, if you can just introduce yourself and what you do. We can work our way around a little bit.
My name is Royal Field, and I'm the design build coordinator for Easter Construction. Very great. Superior Plumbing and Heating.
Scott Boney with Rim Architects.
I'm John Steele.
I'm Eric Cowling with EIC Engineers, electrical engineer.
Ray Hickle, residential light commercial.
Tyler Loken Construction, structural.
Ross Knopfsinger, Manager of Engineering Services.
And Jerry Weaver, Community Development Director.
I'm Preston McKee with Raven Electric.
Welcome to our board. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got meeting minutes, three months worth before us. Have you had a chance to look at these? So we are ready to make motions to approve and accept the minutes. And I guess I'd like to do those individually instead of collectively.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele,
I'd like to move for approval of the February 6, 2014 minutes as submitted.
moved by Mr. Steele,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Fradine. Have you had a chance to look at them? So are there any comments to be made? Hearing none, All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Hearing none, that passes. I'll entertain a motion for March 6.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele,
I'd like to move for approval of the March 6, 2014 meeting minute summary as submitted.
moved by Mr. Steele,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Ferdine. Any discussions?
Did we ever get a clarification from legal on that, why that quorum was, did that go out to everybody? Did I not see it?
The April 17th meeting addressed that specifically, and those
Okay.
minutes will be the next ones, yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Abstained? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. And the minutes for April 17.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele,
I move for approval of the April 17th, 2014 meeting minute summary as submitted.
moved by Mr. Steele,
I guess I'll second that one as well. Everyone's
Second.
jumping up here to do.
second. The rest of you are allowed to participate too. Second by Mr. Ferdine. Any discussion? And this does discuss the majority votes and how to interpret that, and we did find that March meeting was performed properly. Any other discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That passes. Next order of business is appearance request, public hearings. Sir, did you have any statement you'd like to present at this time? All right, just want to make sure you have that opportunity. We don't have any unfinished business before us, so our new business is the proposed adoption of the 2012 building codes. We have a presentation by staff, please.
As I mentioned before, as the acting building official, I've confirmed through Ross and our office, and the local amendments that are in front of you have all went through the public committee process that we selected. All changes were made in writing. All of the committees met. I believe all of the board members that chaired those committees confirmed that as well, and confirmed that all the changes made and voted on in those meetings and committee meetings are accurate and in front of you. What I did want to mention, the only code that's not in front of you right now and will be back in front of you is the administrative code. And the reason there is we're fine-tuning the fees and the structure with regard to meeting the requirements of the municipal financial and fee structure. So there are some changes. I'm still working and also working with the three large agencies that are affected, or organizations, I should say, that have initially given their okay for fee increases, but we're still trying to get that before we come to you in writing, and so everybody can be behind it. But those three agencies that we're working with is ABC, AGC, and the home builders. So we still aren't quite finished with that document. Once we are, we'll reconvene another building board meeting to address that item only. Other than that, all of these codes have went through that process. And I do have one additional local amendment that I'd like to have you vote on and put into the IRC. It has to do, I can pass it around and somebody can make a motion and put that in when the time comes that you vote on the IRC piece. But for those of you that have not participated on the building board, I was talking back a little bit. I'm just going to kind of go over a little bit of what I said so everybody understands that. The fact that the way the codes typically work these days is we assign a board, the board assigns members from your building board to each of these building codes local amendment committees. Therefore, someone of that building board member that's on that committee becomes the chair of that committee. So the municipality is not running those meetings. It's the chair of, a member of the building board is the chair of that meeting and runs those individual code meetings. We take and start with the original local amendment booklet from the prior codes, and that committee starts going through that entire local amendments with the idea of doing one of two things: putting only local amendment changes in there that have to do with our climate, changing anything that happened to in the past 3 years be added by policy. They should be looking at those to try to incorporate those into the code if they're not nationally incorporated into the code. The whole idea is in the interim between those 3 years is to change and get things out of policy and get them into code, because the whole point is trying to solidify, make everybody know of everything that is changed. Sometimes we have to change in that 3-year span. The building official needs to put policies out to clarify and make sure things work. And that this code cycle is the big time to be able to change and incorporate those policies into the code. So then you limit the number of policies and you delete some of the policies after that because they're not needed anymore. So that process went through. Now at this stage, what I mentioned earlier is the fact that those chairmen of each one, I don't know how many of you were chairman, but several of you were probably chairman on each individual code. And so however the chair sees to go through each of these, whether they adopt them all at once or individually, at least the person that was the chairman of that committee can justify that the process was good, it was an open, it was a public process, everybody voted, and everything was documented. The whole point in the past was there was a lot of code changes back in the early 70s and 80s that were not documented. Nobody understood why the changes were made. Now everything is documented. Every change from the local amendments is. So then anybody at any time can go look at the book, review why it was changed, so we know in the future why it was changed and why it's in there. And those changes in local amendments should be for something different and out of the ordinary that Anchorage has rather than the national code. So if you're thinking about it that way, you'll understand why why there are local amendments, and for the most part, that's the main reason, is to clarify special issues that we have different than the national standard, and we adopt those. And so in my short time here as being back, I mean, those of you that don't know me, I was building official for 10 years, I think 10, 12 years prior to being reappointed here. I've been upstairs doing some other things for 4 years, but so I have an extensive background on doing this. That's why for the interim here, the mayor has appointed me acting. That's why I'm saying acting, that at some point there will be a new building official appointed. I don't know when that will be. Maybe it's going to wait until the next mayor gets elected or not. But until that time, I did notice several new members that haven't had a time to sit down, and I'll schedule that time. Tana needs to take, whoever's new that hasn't had really an orientation can set that orientation up, and I'll meet with you individually to kind of go over all of the different aspects of the building board, so we don't have elaborated on it here. But in the sense of these codes, I tried to clearly kind of lay out how we do it, and anybody on the board that's been there for a while can probably reattest to that or reaffirm that process, I think, works fairly well. And so we understand you may or may not have participated in every different discipline, but someone on your board has. And so you can resort to them and feel pretty comfortable that they took care of the building board's role in this and made sure that the process was open, it was a public process, and it was fairly done, fairly put together, and not one-sided. So then, and the main reason for that is when we go to the assembly, after your approval, then we will give it to legal, and then we end up putting it onto the assembly's agenda. And that's when we can truly say we not only had the public process in the committee meeting, we had a public process here at the building board level, and then we're going to the public process at the assembly level. And so that's kind of the stages of how we go and how we get there. And everything that we change for enforcement, code-wise, comes through the building board for approval. That's why it's here. That's what your job is for. And then, and so I believe everything's in the state that everything was smooth, everything was clear, everything was documented, everything's in good shape, and we would recommend as the municipality that all of the amendments in front of you today, or all of the local amendments that are in front of you for approval, be approved in the state that they are, because the public process took place and was done over an extensive period of time, and it has been a good process. Pending the one change, and I don't know exactly whether a board member needs to do that or if I can propose the one amendment, but when you get to the IRC, I do have a local amendment that I do want added.
Mr. Steele?
Mr. Chairman, through the chair, if I could ask a question, Mr. Thompson. We're meeting tonight to deal with the building board's action. Have you got an anticipated date when legal will be through with the review and then when the assembly will be hearing this?
No, we'll turn whatever you approve here over to legal starting tomorrow. There's no real, I mean, obviously I'm going to tell them to speed it up and try to get this done quickly, but we're never able to put a date on our legal department's time frame to get through it.
Mr. Thompson, is it your understanding that these would be effective as of date of assembly approval, or would that be approved effective January 1, or how would that work?
I mean, obviously, depending on the time that we go to the assembly, I mean, it would be ideal if we could put it on January 1st, but I can tell you in the past, there's been April 1st, July 1st, September, October. It kind of depends on the time to go forward with it and the amount of time to give the public a chance to address the new codes and be able to design and move forward. As always, though, anybody that's 50% designed at the time that the codes are adopted still have the ability to use the existing code to move forward, because we can't really try to bring that forward. But I mean, our intent would be the sooner the better, but yet that's always flexible, and a lot of times lately the assembly helps set that date for us.
Thank you. And these amendments as proposed here are through the committees and haven't been altered in any way other than through the committee process?
I believe that is the case, except for one item. That one item is in the IRC, and that one item was the committee voted to take out the requirement that the national committee put in for when you do a unfinished basement to rock the lid in that point and make basically fire protect the joists in the I would say I'm trying to think of the terminology, I've been out of the terminology, but the I-beams that are like OSB type of made I-beams, typically those have been known to, in a fire, lose their stability in a fire and cause issues. Sharon, the building official, made it very clear in the meeting that the committee voted on it that she could not support that change and would make that take that change that the committee voted on out of the local amendments. After further look, I did get a phone call today to talk about it and look at it. I looked, and the information that has come out is that this was supported by the National Home Builders Association, and it's backed up for the fact that the reason why it's needed is there has been fatalities across the United States, and there's actually been injured firefighters in Alaska injured for in Anchorage for this exact scenario. So therefore, I agree 100% with Sharon's removal of that exception in the IRC. So barring that, that's the only change that I know of at this time that was made contrary to what was decided on the floor of the Assembly. And as the acting building official, I concur with Sharon's judgment on that, in this case 100%, that it needs to go in, and I believe that she made the right call in that aspect. And after talking with the fire department today, they also concur and agree with Sharon's move.
Mr. Fields.
Yeah, I have a question. So the 2012 code is looking like it's going to be implemented for the year 2015, and the 2015 codes are already out. When is the plan to start the process of amendments for the 2015 code and possibly get those amendments through? I'm just trying to establish a timeline here. I mean, if we're going to be under the 2012 code for 1 year and then switch to 2015, does that really make a lot of sense? You know, I mean, seems like that would be...
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming in the middle. I don't know when this process started. Typically, it usually starts as soon as the new codes come out, and you do start trying to do that. But at the same time, the city of Anchorage has tended to wait and get moving on it once the state of Alaska has moved on it, and so therefore the state's going to move. You know, it's going to take a year or more for them to approve it, and then if we did our thing, it's going to be another 1.5 to 2 years. So we're right on track that it'll be 3 years before the next code would be probably adopted anyway. So there's too many technology things this day and age making it into the codes to not think about moving forward on new codes in the normal cycle range every 3 years. If we waited to the next code, we're talking 2 to 3 years away, and you're missing 6 years of technology. The building official would be trying to entertain alternate means and methods for all the products that are in there. And you guys know the technology and the things that are coming out these days. It's just so fast that we need to keep with adopting codes in the normal time frame that we have in the past, and will continue. And just because the new one's coming out, it takes a lot of time to sort through it. They're going to have amendments to that, because once it comes out, there's a lot of errors, and so the first 6 months is just kind of a review of it, and then they do a republishing of that document with all of the changes. Then the state would adopt it, then we would get to it. So I don't think there's no chance that we could all of a sudden have the new codes up and be here a year from now and be trying to adopt that in a year. It's going to take multiple years to do that.
Okay, that's just what I wanted to hear. If it's 3 years out before we adopt the 2015, then it makes sense. But if it was something that, because it just seems like we're a good solid year behind when we normally adopt the codes.
Yeah. May I add to that? Yeah, if we were on the traditional Anchorage schedule, we would have adopted the 2012 codes in January 2014.
Yeah.
So if we'll be 1 year behind.
Okay.
So
Okay, is there also a grace period once these codes are adopted? I mean, anything that's already in design or that's already been submitted to the city, or do you say like, okay, 6 months from now, everybody has to be using it? How does that work?
I mean, typically, if you can come in and say you're designing it and it's 50% designed by the time the codes are adopted, you know, we always entertain being able to use the old code or the new code. I mean, either one. So it's never been a problem in the 15 years I've been dealing with it. We've dealt with that every time the code changes. The assembly is the one who sets the date. I mean, we're going to put a recommended date, but I don't know if they always follow the recommended date. They kind of listen to the industry, and the industry talks about how long it'll take to get up to speed in that new code. Then we pick a date. Obviously, you never want to do that in the middle of July, in the middle of the season. You try to do it before the construction season or after the construction season. You know, obviously, I'm going to push to try to get this through really quick and give it some time to where we can get this approved before the end of the year and have it live by the end of the year. But, I mean, I can't 100% guarantee that, but I can definitely put in my request to the municipal attorney's office to get that taken care of. And so, you know, I would hope that we could. I'd be optimistic that we could have it for the next building season, but I don't know 100%, but I'm going to definitely push that.
Mr. Thompson, where's the state in relationship to adopting the 2012 family of codes?
They had their codes out for review, as some of you probably know, a few months ago, and then they just pulled them. And they didn't give an explanation why they pulled them. They just pulled them. So I actually went back and reviewed the document that they had out, and it was in really poor shape. I think that's why they pulled it. And I haven't spoken to them, so they appear to be on some sort of indefinite hold for adoption of the 2012 codes. And if we proceed in our normal course here, we'll probably adopt the 2012 codes before the state does.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't know if this is the right time or not, but I'll bring it up now, that I noticed that the International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition is in here, and that was very, very controversial in 2009, that I guess it was before the assembly that we actually stayed with the 2006, that we skipped that 2009 edition. Is there, whether it's somebody on the panel or staff that can talk about the 2012 and what's in that's and how it relates to 2006, 2009?
Yeah, I was on the committee, and the key issues, it seemed like, were electrical in nature that they argued about, and it was namely the lighting. And the committee put a lot of work into the 2012 code, and they pretty carefully watered down the parts that they thought that the industry would, I guess, reject, or what the industry would not accept. And so basically the local amendments created for the 2012 code have the kind of overall effect of actually watering down the national code to probably bring it into line closer to something to the 2006 that we're under. And then on the residential side, basically it's very similar to the AHFC requirements, the State of Alaska energy requirements, but it's even probably a little watered down from what the state requires. I know in a couple areas the state's requirements are a little bit more, I guess, I don't know about restrictive, but they require more. So, I mean, obviously, you don't know what kind of reaction you're going to get, but there really wasn't that many individuals that spoke out against it. I think the problem was the quiet majority really didn't speak out for it, you know?
Mr. Seal, you had a comment?
I was just going to follow on to what Mr. Nossinger said, and I think the committee had this conversation extensively in the beginning and throughout the process, and it was one that we want to do action that kept the family of code in terms of their approval the same, so that you didn't have, per se, jumping back to the 2009 as part of this cycle. Recognizing that it was a big step and that it did need some tempering, that we felt that the community wouldn't accept jumping right to the 2012, and it was very thoughtfully reviewed, but it was with the intent that we can't stay with the 2006 Energy Code forever, and let's make the first increment and move forward.
I'd like to add to that just a little bit. Both John and I were on the 2009 and the 2000 IECC committees, and I believe that we were really stayed pretty close to all of our recommendations that were for the 2009 code. And so a lot of the adoptions or changes to the 2012 were the same items we used for the 2009, like they said, so we didn't jump 6 years ahead. And we mainly looked at that from a cost perspective, you know, because a lot of things that they do in here cost money, and we didn't want to jump 6 years ahead and hit the entire construction community with the costs in jumping 6 years.
If I may, I got another question here. I noticed that the National Electric Code is not in here. Pardon my, it is?
If I may, through the chair, it's,
I stand corrected.
the process is you throw out all the Title 23, and then you bring it all back in. So we're throwing out the 2011 NEC, and then we're readopting the 2011 NEC. So it's in here, but it's not changing. It's the exact same code.
And when's the next edition of National Electric Code come around?
It's out right now, so I guess we need to look at setting up a committee and start reviewing it.
That it was going to be released for publish? Or call for committees?
Yeah, generally we wait till the fall when people start slowing down, and we'll have the meetings.
Isn't the NEC always a year behind the IBCs and everything, though? That's pretty typical, I think. That's when it's adopted.
Thank
Year
you.
behind or 2 years ahead?
Yeah.
What's that schedule? Any other questions?
I would recommend on IBCC, we have time to adjust, and it's more in line with what we're able to not have a lot of impact on the community that we're doing tonight. So I think we're now in a different place than we were. And it's still like that. We're still going to have road level. But I don't feel it.
Thank you. Mr. Fields, you're good?
I'm good.
Okay, just want to make sure you get an opportunity.
Before we get started, though, I did go through everything, and I came up with about 7 comments, areas that I think there may be some conflicts with what was adopted in the IBC or the IRC versus what was indicated in the IECC.
If I may, if I can hold you back just a moment until we get a motion on the table, and then we'll open it up for discussion and entertain those at that time.
Got it.
And I'm thinking the way the codes are laid out here, we should probably do these individually, especially since we have an amendment before us, and Mr. Fields does have a couple items. If that's acceptable to everybody, I'll assume that as a yes then. Let's start with 2315, the International Building Code. I'll entertain a motion for acceptance.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele?
I move for adoption of the Chapter 2315, local amendments to the International Building Code 2012 edition.
Motion by Mr. Steele. Looking for a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Ferdine, thank you. Comments, questions regarding the IBC?
Yeah.
Mr. Fields?
Excuse me. You probably need to open that up for public hearing first.
Oh. Okay. Yes, sir. If you step up to the mic and please introduce yourself and,
My name's David Boggs. I'm an engineer here in town. Got a question for, on the IBC and it relates to the other codes that I want to make sure brought up. When the references change and standards change, and we've had it happen a few times, what is the process in the codes we're stipulated for alternate means methods for the fire department, the zoning, and the building codes for uniformity? For an example, the combustible belts for elevators has changed. There's now an FM code that says you do not have to put sprinklers in for the floor. And that's a real recent change, and it's coming out in the current NFPA 13. And if you check the previous one, it wasn't in there. You know, it's, as Ron was saying, technology and everything's changing in all the standards.
could you speak to the microphone, please, just to make sure we get picked up?
Is this,
Thank you.
okay, I thought he unhooked it. So the question comes in, how does the design and the construction community keep abreast of these changes? There's not a single depository for them. So right now, we have to deal with the Otis people, and they say, hey, you know, this change is out there, we don't have to put the sprinklers in. The sprinkler contractor says, yeah, it's still required. We go down, and so there's confusion out there, and I just feel it's going to happen more and more as industry and technology things are changing. Has the code adoption process, when this comes through, where do I find that in the code amendments, all the latest changes? Is there a spot for that? This may not be the correct form for that question. I don't know. Shall I ask the question again, John?
Other than alternate means?
Yes. Because right now there's supposedly a standard out there for elevator, the combustible belts. Remember the problem we have with combustible belts for sprinklers and elevator shafts? We have to put that in there. Well, that affects multiple disciplines. And right now, there's a standard out there, and if you go back to NFPA 13, the current edition, even though it is not adopted, it says we do not have to put them in there if this standard is met. And so we've run into good problems on a project with that because there's not a central depository that the different construction people and the engineers and the architects and the authority can necessarily agree upon. You know, we go through a question and answer period on that. So is that addressed someplace in the code amendments, or is that just an alternate means and method each time we have to address that?
I mean, just answering that, I would just say if there's not a direct, detailed clarification in the code, then it does become an alternate means and methods or a negotiation with the fire marshal and the building official and the elevator inspector is what I would see. And I mean, I can tell you that's one of hundreds. I mean, we deal with them all day long, every day. That's all the building official does is kind of weigh those, and knowing full well that all disciplines are never perfectly intertwined and tied together and everything's the case. I mean, I know it's a difficult answer to say, except for the fact that, if someone writes it up, then you're going to end up having to deal with it as an alternate means of methods or a negotiated manner between those three parties, because obviously it's an elevator person, it's a sprinkler person, and the building person to solve those three. As well as the codes are written to try to crisscross disciplines, they don't always succeed in all of that. A lot of what we would do is you just have to prove to us that you have a non-combustible belt, and if the sprinkler code says you don't need anything when it's non-combustible, it should be a slam dunk. That should be the answer. It should need, no alternate means and methods should be needed if the code said you had to sprinkler it only if combustible materials were in there and it was deemed not to be a combustible material. So I guess I hear what you're saying. I don't know if there's a clear answer. I doubt that it was even addressed in the codes or the alternate means of method or in the alternative codes, the local amendments, but.
Yeah, it's something that's new that came out in the latest NFPA 13.
Right.
And the amendments here right now say that whether it's combustible, you have to put the sprinklers in the shaft, even though it's not required if you have passed this FM test with the current NFPA 13.
Right. I mean, what I would say is what happens in the interim, if say a code selection has been made and you go out there and there's a very serious change out in the industry, that's what we write policies for. There's a code section in the IBC that says the building official and the fire marshal have the ability to write policy in the interim. So we would write a policy to clarify that if something came out and the standard was available and it's very clear and it wasn't adopted in this code, rather than reconvening the code committee now. I'm doubting that it was dealt with because this is the first I've heard of it. And Ross probably hasn't heard of it.
It has been addressed, matter of fact. I was in a committee where we did talk about this, and we had fire and elevator and building together. And we talked about the pros and cons of sprinklers in the elevator shafts with the understanding that these are combustible belts. And if I recall properly off the top of my head here, we decided that though the belt was combustible, if it did burn, there was not an imminent failure of the belt because of the steel reinforcing that's still within it. And that the likelihood of burn was very, very low. The likelihood of sprinkler problems within the hoistway was much higher, and we said that we would not require sprinklers within elevator shafts that had those combustible belts in them. Now, was a policy written on that? That I do not recall.
No, as a member of the Fire Code Committee, this was discussed, and when this amendment was passed, the latest FM test was not out there. And so NFPA 13 said, you shall put the sprinkler head in there for the combustible belts. And this is kind of going back that technology and things are changing, and now that it has changed, and FM has a test, and NFPA 13 says if it meets this criteria, you do not have to put a sprinkler head anymore for the combustible belt. And I just want to bring it up as a typical problem that industry is facing that we have to bring up to the building official on here. And that's more of just an educational process I wanted to bring up before the board, that this is what we're dealing with. And I don't have a good solution for it, but the amendments, I don't know if there's another way of dealing with it. And I just want to bring it up when we do the amendment process, that it's been working dealing with the building officials and the people. Well, I find most people in MOA agreeable to work out problems in construction and design. But I just want to bring that up, that there is a problem in the codes that if, I'm hoping to have a little discussion here if there's a solution for it or not, but I just want to bring it up, that I find that to be a big problem, that there's not a single depository, that if, I want to ask if this problem has been resolved previously with the building department, I can't find out where it has been or has not.
If I may, through the chair.
Mr. Nossinger.
So the building code, the IBC references standards. When it comes to fire sprinklering a building, the building code doesn't tell you how to sprinkle the building. It says sprinkle the building in accordance with NFPA 13, and in turn, they reference a specific year of that standard. But then in turn, the building code sprinkler requirements are written based on that standard. So the municipality does not update standards. We do not say, all right, the 2012 IBC references the 2010 version of NFPA 13. It does not reference the 2013 version of NFPA 13 that you're talking about. So the IBC people have not had a chance to incorporate the changes in the 2013 NFPA 13 into the IBC. So we don't change standards. The whole issue with the combustible elevator belts is still being debated nationally. It's not like a resolved issue out there. The testing that they ended up using to prove that those belts were acceptable was basically the same test that they used to demonstrate that the little cable, electrical cable that travels with the elevator is acceptable. But the belts have a tremendous amount of more fuel associated with them than the electrical cabling. And when they burn, it's the amount of smoke that they create that goes into the elevator shaft and then can get out of the shaft and then go out on the upper floors of the building is really the issue. It's not that the elevator's going to fall. It's not going to fall. It's got brakes on it. It's the amount of smoke that can get in the exit way.
Right. So this is just an example. Okay. I realize there's lots of issues with the belt. I've talked to Mark quite a bit. But so is there a place in the amendments that list where a design professional or construction people can go to find out if there's been an acceptable alternate means for something like this when the codes change? NFPA 13 changes in 2013.
Well, one, what you're asking is there a list to where if we've made a change in interpretation or a change in an approved product in between the codes, what do? We have handouts, we have policies to address those type of issues. Other than that, no, we don't broadcast and hand out every alternate means and methods because most of them aren't to that effect where it's a general process across an entire industry. If it's across the entire industry, we create the policy in the interim till the next code cycle comes up and then it gets into the code. So I would say, no, we do not track every single alternate means and methods. But we do, right, if it's a big enough issue and you have an issue and you come to us, we write policy all the time, then everybody knows about that change or that allotment. But on alternate means and methods, it's just typically a case-by-case basis. A policy is for everybody to use, and we are tasked with, as the building officials, tasked with trying to make sure you enforce the thing the same to everybody. So if it's a generic situation that we can be solved, then we would write a policy if the code has been adopted, and then you have the policy to use for the entire time the rest of the way. But otherwise, no, we do not individually publish all the alternate means and methods that we sign all the time.
Okay, that's a good answer. That was my understanding, but I want to make sure that that's what's been going on. Mr. Chairman, that answered my question.
Anything else?
Nada, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go back to the motion at hand on the International Building Code. And Mr. Fields, you had some comments for us, please? Is your mic on? Is your microphone on?
It is now.
Okay, thank you.
I had kind of pass out the comments that I came up with. There's 3 items that are under the IBC, 1 item under the IFC, and 3 items under the IRC. And they mostly all deal with wordings that were put into the IBC and that are in conflict with what wording was used for amendments in the IECC. And then it's the same for the IRC sections except for 2 of them. There's one item that has to do with 2 items that have to do with R values, and another one just a question about the wind zone map.
Can I ask a question? Were they brought up at those 2 committees and then they both voted differently?
No, I just think that there are 2 different committees working on 2 different, on 2 different codes, and that these things, I mean, they aren't huge deals, but, well, for instance, an easy one that everybody could understand, both under the IRC and the, under the IECC, under residential and commercial, it was decided that the R value for rigid insulation the R value could be used at 40 degrees versus 75. But then that's contradicted in the IRC 2385 because they call that those insulation values are to be determined at 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
Do you know which is correct?
The 40. I mean, that's what...
So then I would say just make a motion to make an amendment to fix it and get it on the right page. I just don't have the technical documents here to back either one of those up. Maybe Ross does.
Well, I think all of these things are in the documents that we have before us.
I mean, the other thing is, remember, if those are technical mistakes, if you adopt the code tonight, I can go back and we can fix those technical things because the intent is still to be correct and smooth across the way. So if you identify those 5 items and they're just like that, that's just a quick edit that makes sense, and that's just coordinating between multiple codes, and we can do that after your adoption. That's not changing the code. So if you have those 5, we can give them to Ross, and after you get through these, those sound like edits, and those are just like spelling errors. If we find spelling errors after you adopt it, we fix them, and we just want to make them coordinate between the 2. So if 40 is correct, it's just an edit of 75 down to 40 in the other document, and we can make that happen after.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Steele?
If I might, I think, Ron, you're correct in terms of how things could be resolved, but it's going to be put in your lap as to determine if the amendments to the energy code supersede the building code or vice versa. Because the 2 differ.
I was answering, I mean, I just asked the quick answer, what is correct? It sounded like it was a typo or an error made from 75 to 40, that 40 is what the true number is, and they just typoed it. Is that correct?
I don't know that for a fact, because one comes from the IECC and one comes from the IRC. So I'm not sure if they were aware that the IECC adopted or proposed to adopt the 40 degrees over the 75 degrees temperature.
Did both of them make edits, or did just the one make an edit?
The IECC, under both commercial and residential, changed it to 40 degrees. But then in the IRC, their table that they're using for the thicknesses of ESP or XPS in table R402.1.1 describes it, that the R values will be judged from 70 degrees Fahrenheit testing, which is what's been
Is
said for years.
It's not based upon a standard, that temperature?
It is.
And what
Correct.
so the standard should be the number, and if the standard is 40, then they should be moved to 40. That's what I'm hearing.
What we did is we changed the standard. They have the standard that calls it out at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, or 40 degrees and 25 degrees Fahrenheit, they believe what it is. And in the IECC committee, we determined that using 70 degrees Fahrenheit to determine the R value of insulation used in Alaska, since our average temperature, a year average temperature is 35 degrees, was incorrect. It should be the 40 degrees. We should be able to use the 40 degree Fahrenheit testing R value.
Is the 40 degree more restricted or less restricted?
Less restrictive.
So it seems to me like we would resort to the IECC as the requirement body that deals with energy, which is what...
I would agree with that. I don't know that everybody else would, but I would certainly agree
I
with
would
that.
argue the fact that if it's less restrictive in the IRC, most IRC folks would be just fine with that.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair,
Mr. Nossinger?
this is somewhat of an apples to oranges comparison. We changed the value from 75 to 40 in the IECC, basically because the R value goes up a little bit when you drop the test temperature, which means you can use maybe potentially in a given scenario just a little bit less foam plastic insulation. This table, this reference in the IRC is for shallow frost-protected footings. These are for shallow footings that don't go down to below the frost line. Sometimes they only go down like maybe 18 inches deep. And this information in here, it's in the IRC, and it's also extracted out of an ASCE standard based on research on the performance of insulation installed vertically and horizontally, and it takes into account moisture absorption and long-term installation, and they derate the values of the insulation. They, like for type 2 EPS, they're only allowing you to use an R 2.6 per inch, basically because they want to make sure that there's going to be plenty of insulation there to prevent frost from getting under that foundation. And in addition to that, they want you to use the 75 degree, which is 75 degree Fahrenheit is kind of the universal testing temperature for all these products. So I get, from my point of view, even though it appears we got two different standards here, they're addressing two different scenarios. One scenario is I'm just trying to insulate my house to the energy code. The other scenario is I'm trying to protect my foundation from frost getting underneath of it. And so in my opinion, they don't necessarily need to be the same. And the frost-protected foundation portion is more conservative. It's going to require more insulation than the energy code's going to require.
Mr. Ferdine?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to be honest and say that some of this is above my head as a member of this board, as a mechanical engineer. I would refer these to staff and with their expertise and their ability to talk with the energy code and the building code committees and come up with a good response on these to get them in line. What I'm afraid of, what I always worry about when we get down to these last minute where we're here to put a bow on this thing and send it off to the assembly is that any changes we make to the codes at this point, we don't have the benefit of our 10 other individuals in the room who are experts on this. And so, you know, I'm going to be voting on something and I really don't know what the correct answer is without having the codes and being able to do research. So I'm very hesitant of voting on one way or the other on any of these items. And I would much rather have staff take on these items and look at them and then defer to a policy at a future date to kind of work through the ambiguities between the codes there.
Comments from staff?
Just to let you know, we're coming back with the admin code. We can come back with a report at that time of these 5 issues and see whether or not we think you need to make a vote on a additional amendment. But we haven't seen all 5. I've heard one. I've heard that it could be a typo. I heard it could be just a change. I heard it can be, apples to oranges. It doesn't matter. They could be different. But so I agree with Craig. It's pretty easy for us to solve those things with a little bit of time, and it doesn't sound like that type of issue is a big matter. We just want to take and be able to test something somehow or put the number associated with something. So I can come back, we'll guarantee we'll come back with those 5 things that he has and have an answer for those when we come back with the admin code. And if we need an amendment at that time to add a change to the code, then we'll ask. If not, we'll just say, hey, you adopted just fine.
I very much appreciate your bringing these to everybody's attention, and I kind of concur that, if we let staff work on these a little bit, I don't think these are germane to the overall amendments here, and so I think we can act on these tonight if you concur.
Act on these tonight? I thought that they were going to look at these and propose, make some proposals, and then when they come back, oh, I see, we agree, we adopt tonight, and then you come back with responses to this when we get the
Yeah, and if an additional amendment needed to be made to change 1 or 2, we would bring those up, and you could do that at the time of the admin code.
I'm totally fine. Yeah, I mean, they aren't big deals, but I believe some of them could create conflicts for you guys when a building
Right.
comes in and goes.
No, we appreciate you
says
pointing
this.
that out. It helps us out understand that, and absolutely, we need that perspective, and I feel confident Ross can solve those in a couple days, and we'll see whether or not they need to be a change. But I mean, I would respect that the committees did that, and hopefully when they adopted those, they were just apples to oranges, therefore they don't have a problem. It's up to you how you respond and how you act, but at the end of the day, we can get back to you and tell you whether or not one of the codes need to be brought back up to make that change. But as far as we know, I think that we can handle that pretty easily.
I concur.
Any other discussions on the IBC? Got a motion to adopt as amended here with these amendments. Yes, we have that, and with some possible things that staff will be looking into. So based on that, hopefully we can do this by just a quick call here. That all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Hearing none. The IBC proposed amendments passes. Next one would be Chapter 23-20, Local Amendments to the International Mechanical Code 2012 edition. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Ferdine?
I move that we adopt Section 2320.
Just point of order real quick. You need to open public hearing first and then make the motion.
Can I speed things up that, Mr. Boggs, do you have anything to say on these other ones here to?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ferdine?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Section 2320, International Mechanical Code Amendments.
Moved by Mr. Ferdine,
Second.
second by Mr. Steele. Discussions?
Mr. Chair, I'll just say, I chaired the mechanical code, and Mr. Merchant chaired, was on that committee as well. He chaired the fuel gas code, and we say that pretty much it was just business as usual, nothing spectacularly out of, in the amendments on the mechanical code. Or the fuel gas code, for that matter, either.
Any discussions, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Hearing none, that passes. Next section is Chapter 23.25, Local Amendments to the Uniform Plumbing Code 2012 edition. Mr. Gray.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept the amendments to the Chapter 23.25 local amendments to the Uniform Plumbing Code 2012 edition, as written.
Second.
I will second.
Moved by Mr. Gray, second by Mr. Fredine. Nothing from the floor. Comments? Questions? Mr. Gray?
Chairman, I'd like to say that the process was done properly in my eyes on this. It was extensive. There was quite a few changes per the UPC code as far as moving and shifting paragraphs around from the 2009 edition. So it was fairly extensive, and it was very good discussion.
Other questions, comments? Okay, all in favor of adopting the Uniform Plumbing Code amendments as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Passed. Next is Chapter 23-30, Local Amendments to the National Electrical Code 2011 edition.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cowling.
I propose to adopt the Chapter 23.30 local amendments to the National Electrical Code 2011 edition as written.
Moved by Mr. Cowling,
Second.
second by Mr. Fields. Any questions, comments?
Since this one didn't change from the last amendment process, and there's probably nothing to discuss. No committees met or made any changes to this one.
Any additional questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion passed. Next is the Chapter 23.45, Local Amendments to the International Fire Code 2012 edition.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele.
I move for approval of Chapter 2345, Local Amendments to the International Fire Code 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Steele. Second by Mr. Cowling. Questions, comments? Mr. Steele?
Just a comment, served on the committee. We started meeting in mid-December and then reinitiated in the first of the year and completed our efforts in May of 2014. It was well attended by a good cross-section of the industry, both from design side, code enforcement, as well as construction and vendors. It addressed issues of previous state amendments, considerations that are valid relative to our local conditions, and I think it brought together a very cohesive set of amendments.
Other questions and comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Next item, Chapter 23.26, .55, Fire Protection Services Outside Service Areas 2012 edition. Looking for a motion, please. Moved by Mr. Logue.
Second?
Second by Mr. Fields. Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Next is Chapter 23.65, Local Amendments to the International Existing Building Code 2012 edition.
Mr. Chair, I think we missed the 23.60.
Did I miss a?
Yep.
I don't have a
The,
60 in my package, I'm sorry. The IEBC is 65. Energy conservation, is my deck out of order here? Oh, I pulled it aside, I'm sorry. Okay, let me back up, Chapter 23.60, Local Amendments to the International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Colleen.
I propose that we adopt Chapter 23.60, Local Amendments to the International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Colleen,
Second?
second by Mr. Steele. Questions, comments?
I think as I sat here, I remembered a little more why we had such pushback from the electrical. The last go-around was, prior to that, the previous versions had been adopted, but no one had done any enforcement at all of any electrical requirements whatsoever. So it was a really huge hump to come over that now we're going to start enforcing it, and we're even pushing it ahead. So I believe that we've gotten accustomed to it. It's running through engineering. It's going through the process of getting built, and we're not getting a lot of pushback from our clients. So I think now it's caught up and on speed, and I don't think we're going to have any major blowback on this.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the primary issue lighting, specifically exterior, in that edition?
Well, there was two, I think there was more than that. There was issues about lighting standards. I believe that's kind of along a separate vein about the height of the poles, and that was a whole dark skies issue. I don't know that that's directly related to this.
Okay, Mr. Steele?
If I might, I think some of it might have been, historically, previously, there was also an adoption of mandatory LEED standards for municipal buildings that at the same time was in existence, and I think there was some overlap in some of the perceptions and concerns. I know that lighting was brought up at presentation last at the building board, and I think Mr. Dwiggins was speaking on behalf of the BOMA, or had identified himself as a member of BOMA. Again, I think the process is one that we as a social group, if you will, I think have moved forward with accepting the need for recognizing this. And this commitment was made that way. There was not the among the committee members, again, a good cross-section. I don't think there was the consternation of what was amended and adopted, and it was, as Mr. Fields appropriately pointed out, it really took it to the level where it was for the last cycle of codes, and was cognizant of the extremes of the 2012 and what that impact might be. I think also there was the overlay that on the residential side, it was backed off a little bit in the 2012 standards, but it was also pointed out that the financial institutions and the way that a lot of housing is financed, they are going to have to meet the more stringent standards of AHFC, no matter what is in the municipal code. So that, I think, may moot a lot of those issues depending on the financing vehicles that were being used. So I think what's been put together here is a good balance and a reasonable step forward.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Hearing none. All in favor of adopting the local amendments to the International Energy Conservation Code 2012 edition, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? One abstention. Motion passes. Now I can go on to Chapter 23.65, Local Amendments to the International Existing Building Code 2012 edition. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the Chapter 2365 Local Amendment to the International Existing Building Code 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Steele. Second by whom, please? Mr. Lowe. Questions, comments? I sat on this board along with the International Building Code, and here again, there was a fair amount of rearranging of pieces within the code, but there wasn't a whole lot that was really changed all in all. This did go through a separate review of structural, so the structural committee did weigh in on some of the lateral force resistance, et cetera, roof diaphragm, so items in, I believe it's 4 through 13, chapters 4 through 13 were addressed by the structural committee. And it looks like there's more that was in 10 as well, 10 and 11, 12. Were there other comments? Hearing none. All in favor of adopting the local amendments to the International Existing Building Code 2012 edition, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Next is Chapter 2370, Abatement of Dangerous Buildings 2012 edition.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Fredine.
Actually, I've got, before we go into this amendment, just a clarification from Mr. Weaver or staff, because we are still underneath the old amendment or old administrative code. Can you clarify for us the voting requirements that are required in a positive on these votes before, for a positive, something to move forward? We had one abstention. I want to make sure that we don't all accidentally, not unknowingly, it's not a simple majority of votes. I want to make sure we don't accidentally fall into a trap like that tonight.
Are you referencing a previous meeting?
Correct, and we're still underneath that administrative code, which I believe said fully all 50% plus one of sitting members or appointed members, so is that 15, which would be 7.5 plus 8.5, so basically we need 9 votes in affirmative, or is it 8 votes in affirmative?
There's 14 members.
There's 15 members. Yes.
It'd be 8.5, which would be 9 votes. I just want to make sure that we get that clarified.
Yes,
before we got.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Burdine, that really hasn't changed, so it still requires 9.
Maybe we ought to back up and talk about that.
There's 9 present. Mr. Hickle.
Through the chair, may I ask a question of the staff? Can we revisit that rule? Because that really kind of hamstrings us.
You will review it in the admin code when it comes to you in the next meeting.
Yes, we've changed that in the admin code.
Okay.
Yeah. The proposed admin code, I should say.
That was the
16,
Energy
or 60,
Conservation
excuse
Code.
me. Energy Conservation Code.
You made so.
That actually.
So that,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Colleen,
could I make a motion that we revisit that, the IECC?
call for reconsideration?
Yes.
I'll second that call, or second that call for reconsideration.
Excuse me, just, we were just talking about here, it's, the code's a simple majority, which means 8.
Simple majority of the attending?
No, of the assigned, so you have 7.5, which means you have to have more than 7.5, which is 8.
Okay.
Okay, if it's simple majority and that majority plus one was going
Or
to de novo.
appeals, dealing,
appeals.
to do a de novo hearing.
Okay.
Right. So,
So in this particular case, it would be a simple majority of 8 for all your motions tonight.
So I withdraw the request.
Second withdrawals as well.
okay, so we're good then. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's attention to the details on that.
Excuse me, for the record, should we take a roll call so it's entered as the number instead of ayes? Or is it assumed since there's no nay that everyone but the one abstention voted in favor?
We did mark that there was one abstention.
Okay. And that everyone else did vote?
Yes, yes. Does that satisfy your needs?
I just don't want to have to deal with this again.
Touche, my friend, touche.
I don't either. My abstaining vote was, I guess, a lot of that energy code is 2 tons of energy to save 1 ton energy, and I can't vote for everything in there. So my abstaining was not to go through this again or try to pull off something like the de novo. It was just that I can't deep down. So anyways, yeah, I don't want to go through it again either, so.
I appreciate that. Fortunately, I believe we can say motion passes as it was presented, so we can move on. I don't remember exactly where we are on 2370. Did we get a motion on that yet?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Culling.
I make a motion that we adopt 23.70, abatement of dangerous buildings 2012 edition. Abatement of dangerous buildings 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Culling,
Second.
second by Mr. Steele. Discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That carries. Next is Chapter 23.70, Local Amendments to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, A17.1, 2010, CSA B44-10, Safety Code for Elevators and Escalators. I'll entertain a motion.
As ASME, I'll take it. Mr. Chair, I move to approve Chapter 23.75, local amendments to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME A17.1, 2010 CSA B44-10, Safety Code for Elevators and Escalators.
Moved by Mr. Ferdine,
Second.
second by Mr. Fields. Discussions? Is this the same iteration coming forward as we previously discussed? I don't recall the elevator committee meeting.
It No, it's a new elevator code, 2010 versus 27. And we tried to convene an elevator committee through the industry. There's only a handful of players, and none of them wanted to participate. So basically what you're getting is existing amendments coming forward. And, and then we cleared up the elevator sump drainage requirements. And this has been sent out to industry and sent to the state of Alaska's Department of Workforce and Labor Development, who also regulate elevators at the state level.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Abstain? Opposed? Abstain? Hearing none, that passes. Chapter 23-76, local amendments to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers A18.1, 2008, safety standard for platform lifts and stairway chair lifts.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to adopt Chapter 23.76, local amendments to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME A18.1, 2008, safety standards for platform lifts and stairway chair lifts.
Moved by Mr. Ferdine.
I second.
Second by Mr. Cowling. Discussions? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Next is Chapter 23-85, local amendments to the International Residential Code 2012 edition.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recommend that we adopt Chapter 23.85, local amendments to the International Residential Code 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Fields.
A second.
Second by Mr. Culling? Yes. And within that, we have a proposed amendment. Is that the same? Yeah. So let's, I'll entertain an amendment to include this local amendment, 2385 R401.4, regarding soil tests. Mr. Steele.
Mr. Chairman, before perhaps introducing it, maybe there could be some introduction as to the origin of the exception, and has it been a previous policy?
What I can go on, I'm going to let Ross explain the reason for it, but he had come to me this week about writing a policy for this to allow it, and I suggested, well, we're going to the building board tonight or in the next day or two, so why don't we just get it put into the local amendments? We can deal with the policy for now, between now and then, but why not just incorporate it as we have the chance? But I didn't want to just add it to the code before that we had already sent you, so that's why we put it this effect, and Ross can go over the basis of the exception.
So what this applies to is construction and seismic hazard zones 4 and 5, and those are generally the zones that are along the inlet where you have high or exceptionally high ground failure susceptibility. And basically, the code sections has this language, and it's on page 11 under soil tests, and it says, special site investigations are required in delineated seismic hazard zones after consideration of the proposed location, use, and building type. So if you read about 10 or 15 times, you realize that it wants you to provide a soils report, but there's wiggle room there. And you know, in all these decades, we've never really provided a clarification to this because there's just not that much construction really that takes place in these hazard zones. But it does happen a few times a year. So we figured, well, you know, let's get this codified so everybody knows when I have to provide the soils report and when I don't. And so basically for any new structure, we want to see a soils report, for any new home, I should say. But sometimes they just build additions onto homes. And so we decided, well, if the addition isn't bigger than the original home, you don't need to provide a soils report. And that's the first part of the exception. And the second part of the exception is if the addition isn't taller or has more stories than the existing home, we don't need to see a soils report for that. And then the third qualifier there is that the structural calculations or the structural analysis has to demonstrate that a traditional strip footing foundation is going to be adequate, or that you match the existing foundation. And then the second part of the exception is basically that geotech report's not going to be required for accessory structures that are under 400 square feet. Then the 400 square foot number was picked because that also equates to the size of an accessory structure when a permanent foundation would be required. So we figured that those were reasonable areas where we could draw the line, that you didn't need to provide a geotech report when constructing in these zones of high ground failure susceptibility.
Mr. Loeb.
Through the chair, you said, if I probably should get it back out, but you said a soil investigation. It didn't specifically speak to a soil test or a geotech report. Soils investigation is, I mean, you said you could read it 10 or 15 times. I'd clarify that for me.
I think
how do you get from soil investigation to soil test?
Soil investigation would be a geotech report. You'd actually have to go out. If you didn't have existing soils information for the lot, a geotech would actually have to go out and dig a hole and take a look at the soil and write a report. So it's, you know, it costs money to do it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we let them use soil information from an adjacent lot. You know, if they've got a test that's relatively close by, you know, we'll let them use that. But it's but in most cases, if you're building a brand new home in Hazard Zone 4 and 5, you got to have a site-specific geotech report. And again, these are areas where the soil's been documented as being very suspicious, I guess you could say.
I can see it, the new home, this doesn't give a lot of room for addition on an existing home that, I guess that foundation is not going to be increased if they do find that soil to be X, Y, Z, whatever.
Well, what this exception says is that you could build an addition of equal size and equal height as the existing home and not have to do a soils investigation. So if you got a 2,000 square foot, that's a pretty big addition. I mean, most of these lots are in areas, most of these are your postage stamp lots because they're, you know, they're in Westchester, they're on the Bluff in South Anchorage.
I think, are you reading item 1 on there, the A, that it can't exceed what's already there? It's, what it does is it just can't go double what's already there, over double what's already there. So if you have 1,000 square foot footprint, you can go another 1,000 without having to get the soils report. And that's the biggest scenario that we've been dealing with and makes it really difficult for onerous on an owner to add on, you know, say a 500 square foot addition on a 2,000 square foot house. We'd have to say you got to go spend this enormous amount of money for a soil study. This exempts that and allows you to build that without having to go get that site specific. The building's already there. We feel comfortable that the building's there. It is what it is. I mean, it's not going to increase the hazard more because you're, in a major way. Why require them to do a big soil test? Because the odds are, soil test, they're not going to be able to probably meet the present-day requirements for that foundation anyway with what's there and then the add-on. So this allows them away from that, and it kind of gives us a way of being able to allow some people to use their land in a little bit bigger manner than they might be using it already.
Other discussions? No, we do not have a motion for the newest local amendment into the IRC. Mr. Hickle.
I would like to move to enter the motion into the IRC amendments.
Moved by Mr. Hickle,
Second.
second by Mr. Cowling. Other discussions? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That's been added into the amendments to the International Residential Code. Now I'll go to International Residential Code. We do have a motion and second on that one. Discussions regarding the IRC. Did you have more to present, Mr. Thompson? Other discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That passes. Next, we do not have a .90, do we? No. Okay. Chapter 23.95, Relocatable Ancillary Buildings 2012 edition. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Who's that? Mr. Field?
I moved that we adopt Chapter 23.95 Relocatable Ancillary Buildings 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Field,
A second.
second by Mr. Cowling. Discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That passes. Next is Chapter 23.100, Mobile Aircraft Shelters 2012 edition. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Field?
I move that we adopt Chapter 23.100 Mobile Aircraft Shelters 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Field,
Second.
second by Mr. Loken. Discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? That passes. Next is Chapter 23.105, Grading, Fill, Excavation, and Landscaping 2012 edition.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Field?
I recommend that we adopt Chapter 23.105 Grading, Fill, Excavation, and Landscaping 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Field,
Second?
second by Mr. Steele. Discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Chair,
Whoops, somebody,
Mr. Hickle was
I had a
raising his hand.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hickle.
Oh, no, that's okay, thank you. Hey, can the staff tell us what's different in this than the last go-around?
Oh, okay, yeah, I probably should have pointed out on a lot of these that we went through, like relocatable ancillary buildings and mobile aircraft shelters. All those little codes, they didn't have committees, they didn't change. They just got a new date on them and they're moved through. Fill and grade code is pretty much the same way. Nothing significant changed. other than we added landscaping to the title of it. And the reason we added landscaping to the title of it was we wanted to tip off landscapers that they could potentially move enough material that would trigger a fill or a grading excavation or fill permit. So we didn't change any of the thresholds. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Passes. One left. Chapter 23.110, local amendments to the International Fuel Gas Code 2012 edition. Mr. Ferdine.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt Chapter 23.110, local amendments to the International Fuel Gas Code 2012 edition.
Moved by Mr. Ferdine.
Chair? Second?
Mr. Gray. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Steele.
the copy I received and printed out had editing on, and I'm just wondering if we just want to make note that maybe I'm the only one with that version.
No, it's everyone. Just need some housekeeping on that.
And I'm not taking exception to it being on, but just recognizing that
Formatting.
the formatting is, well, I don't know, I guess what point I'm making, other than it probably shouldn't move forward with those on.
We can approve with formatting removed?
Yeah, I mean, the content is what we are acting on, and that what
Yes.
moves forward
We'll
should be
turn the
removed.
tracking off, that's all.
Yes.
Change trackers on.
Thank you. Good catch. Mr. Hickle?
My question through the chair, doesn't matter if somebody on the panel wants to answer or the staff, did any of the clearances change for exhaust or combustion air or opening window?
I'd have to go back and take a look at the code specifically on that.
Okay.
I don't recall any major issues.
Are you referring to like toilet exhaust discharge relative to an operable window and range hood exhaust discharge?
And meter placement and such things. Sometimes we have window requirements, and then we've got utilities, and sometimes we're jockeying things around. I'm just wondering if anything changed, or we've got to go back and study this to figure out.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any changes in those things.
It doesn't happen very often, but I just wanted to know if there were any major changes to clearances.
Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of. The gas meter thing's more of an N-Star thing. They have their own stipulations that are probably more conservative than the codes. So,
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ferdine?
I would say that David Budo with NSTAR was on that committee with us, and he's been on that committee the last couple code cycles and does bring a great wealth of knowledge from the field of NSTAR and what their current requirements are, so we can implement that into the code. So he's always a great person to have active in both the mechanical and the fuel gas code. But just want to note that he was, since everyone else is talking about how such great committees that they had, I should also put in there that ours is pretty hot too, but it's great to have the NSTAR guy there.
Other discussion items? Hearing none, please indicate your approval of accepting those amendments to the International Fuel Gas Code 2012 edition by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Passes. Gentlemen, we have done a nice mountain worth of work here tonight. Are there any reports?
permit activity?
Yes, please.
Last checked, we're at $512 million year-to-date, which is about 8% above last year at this time.
Is that commercial and residential?
Yeah, it's up across the board. It looks like one category that surprised me was apartments. They're probably mostly coming in the form of townhouses. And yeah, the number of apartment units is up substantially this year. Apartment units, condo units, whatever. And government buildings is down this year, but private sector commercial buildings, new private sector commercial buildings are up. I think we've permitted only one government building to date.
Where are review times sitting?
Most disciplines are sitting pretty good right now. Structural is, they're not too bad. We're getting caught up. The amount of work coming in has slowed down a little bit, so I kind of think we're at the tail end of the big summer rush, you know. We are aware that there's still a few big buildings that are going to hit us. There's a 6-story building that's going to come in a week or two.
How about residential with our, what would you call it, exempt permitting process?
Haven't run numbers or percentages, but yeah, an awful lot of the single families, at least a third, if I had to guess, are coming in exempt. Maybe even a higher percentage are exempt.
And what does that, how is that working out in the field?
I think, you know, it probably varies. I think in some cases there's no problems at all, and then in other cases the inspectors are really struggling with some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Are they struggling with specific contractors, or is it just kind of spread out because of different?
I don't think it's a contractor issue. It's probably more of a who's doing the review and who's doing the design type of issue.
Okay.
The only one that I've been dealing with is a homeowner that chose to use the exempt, and there's just some issues with that. But I haven't dealt with any since I've taken over that have been an issue that have come to my level.
Other questions and comments? Any other reports?
The main thing I wanted to say is, just like I said before, if you're new on the board, I can definitely set up a time to meet with you and familiarize you with the process and all of the things that go along with it. So definitely, you can take my number down, 343-8126, and give me a call. Again, 343-8126. And I can meet with you individually and kind of go over all of the aspects. I guess we can grab a couple at a time if that works, but can't really go more than that. So just give me a holler and I'll definitely talk to you. Obviously, since the last meeting, there was some changes made, and we're just moving forward trying to establish, you know, all of the priorities that when the mayor asked me to take over, he gave me a list of priorities that he wanted. So me and Jerry have been working together, just trying to meet and move forward on those. One of those is fixing Hanson, our permitting software, to get it back to what it used to be, in the sense that there were some changes made throughout the process, and those changes caused some unforeseen consequences throughout the process. But we're trying to enhance Hanson, make more things back online, available to get small permits, a lot of different things that they used to do in our old system that they haven't been. So hopefully we can, in the next 2 months, we just hired a contractor that was the one that helped me build it years ago, to come up and start working with us to refine it. So there's some real positive steps being moved forward in that realm, and it should allow less people to have to come to our office, which is the whole point of that software that it's not doing right now. It wasn't set up that way, and so I think our numbers in the building are too high right now, and that wasn't the intent, so we need to fix that. And so I would say within the next 2 months, we'll solve a lot of those areas and change the configurations that, it is what it is. Where we end up sometimes is not where you're intended, and that's where we are, but couple different fixes. And I have the whole staff on board. There's a whole bunch of different people in the committee, and so we've sorted out all kinds of problems. We've had private side give us some ideas of where we can fix some things and enhance those as well. So I think we're finally fully staffed at the front counter, where they haven't been in probably, I don't know how long. I don't know if it's, the entire time I've been gone, those 4 years, I don't think they've been fully staffed at the front counter. So they have 5 staff up there for the first time in forever, so that are there every day and moving. So, once those have got on board, I haven't seen nearly the lines out there waiting for things. So there's a lot of enhancements being made, and staff is really trying to move forward and move things quicker, and hopefully you guys probably hear it in the field, but I mean, you guys need to bring those ideas, suggestions, let me know anything that were there, aren't there, could be there, ideas that you have that speed things up. Anytime, those that know me or worked with me before know that I take those, I understand them, I try to implement them if we can. So I think that things are moving in a pretty good manner. Staff has made some changes. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not making changes. I am making certain things that they may or may not have been doing recently, and taking suggestions and making those moves. And so I think people have seen a difference in a short period of time trying to speed up the process. So, and a lot of that has to do with just bodies getting there. We've hired a new structural inspector. We hired, I believe we're hiring a new mechanical. We're interviewing here very soon to have a new mechanical inspector. So hopefully some of those positions that just have taken forever to get hired or whatever are now coming out. We're getting bodies and being able to do the things that Sharon and Jerry were trying to get done, but just could never get the bodies to be able to do it. And so the next time we come with the admin code, obviously there are some fee increases in there. I've talked with the industry. Those are important for where we're going, because those will generate funds to put new positions in place. So the whole point of doing any fee increases was to get bodies to help speed up the process. So that's exactly what the goal is and what we're doing to try to move forward. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the last 2.5 months, and my schedule got a whole lot busier a few months ago.
I've heard some rumors that we were working toward the possibility of doing electronic document submittals instead of paper submittals.
Yeah,
can you talk about that?
Jerry and Sharon have been working for quite some time. There's funding available. We have the funding already identified to get electronic plan review. We're working with IT right now to try to get that on the street and get that purchased. The money has been allotted, or at least a portion of it, and then a commitment has been made that if the amount that's been deemed available for it is not quite enough, which we don't think it is quite enough, they do have the commitment to buy whatever it is, the additional funding. So that's a good thing. I think that I would say within the next month or two, that'll be on the street. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a vendor picked, and we can start moving forward to getting the electronic plan review in place. So yeah, there's some good things coming, and there's a lot to do, but it needs to be done and needed to be done, and hopefully we can save both your side and our side money and effort and traveling time to get back and forth to the building, and printing costs when we go to that realm. but it's going to take a little bit more time, but it's not there quite yet. But it's moving there, and we have some funds to move forward, a pretty good, a substantial amount of funds to move forward on it. So it's going to happen soon.
Thank you. Anything else?
Now, I did want to, Ross told me the amount of time that you guys all spent on these codes, and that goes a lot of times unforeseen. I mean, especially when most of you guys are on multiple codes. We understand how much time and effort it takes to do what it is that you're doing, volunteering on the building board, and how much time it takes away from your work during a code cycle. Not so much the other times of the years, but it's very important, the role that you guys play and help us get through that. You know, it would be nice when we do go to the assembly to at least have the chairman, but it'd be nice to have all of you come to the assembly meeting when we do put the codes through and kind of, you know, get recognized a little bit for the efforts that you guys did and the role that you guys play in this process. It's a big, long, drawn-out process. It's very time-consuming for you and for other volunteers, and to me, you know, it's a great time when we get that code adopted at the assembly level to recognize the work that you guys do all the time throughout the year for us. So I will definitely let you know when that is. It'll be obviously sometime over the next 4 or 5 months, something like that. But at that time, I mean, I just wanted to mention that fact that, you know, that staff really appreciated the effort that you guys did throughout the process this past year on doing these code cycles. So and it may be even over a year. I don't know exactly when it started in all of them, but anyway, I wanted to mention that it goes a lot of times without any thanks, but without that approach and that, I mean, it'd be just an enormous task for staff to try to get through that without your guys' help. So I appreciate that.
Any last comments? My thank you again to Tana for taking care of us and getting all of our information together, and thank you very much for all you do. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move for adjournment.
Moved by Mr. Steele.
My second.
Second by Mr. Cowling. Thank you very much, everybody.